Good morning and welcome to this presentation. I would like to acknowledge and thank our guests for coming along today to learn about the ASLEA Code of Ethics. Individuals who gain the NAATI Auslan English accreditation are strongly encouraged to become members of the Australian Sign Language Interpreters Association, also known as ASLEA. As a member of ASLEA, interpreters can take advantage of ongoing professional development, support and advice, as well as many other membership benefits. ASLEA membership is also open to other individuals with an interest in sign language interpreting. For example, students of Auslan and/or Auslan English interpreting, deaf interpreters, parents of deaf children, deaf consumers and organisations. One requirement of gaining NAATI accreditation is that interpreters will adhere to the Professional Code of Ethics for Auslan English interpreters, also known as the ASLEA Code of Ethics. This Code of Ethics has 5 major principles. They are as follows. Number 1, professional accountability. This means accepting responsibility for professional decisions and actions. Number 2, professional competence. This means committing to provide quality professional service throughout one's practice. Number 3, non-discrimination, which is approaching professional service with respect and cultural sensitivity. Number 4, integrity in professional relationships, meaning dealing with things honestly and fairly with participants and colleagues. Number 5, integrity in business practices, dealing honestly and ethically in all business practices. These values are all of equal weight and importance, and interpreters are to understand that each of these core values are to be considered when making ethical and professional decisions in their identity and capacity as an interpreter. Now, to be honest, going through this stuff can be pretty dry and tedious. Please don't fall asleep, okay? Even though it's a bit dull, it's also super important, so listen up. So the Code of Ethics talks about confidentiality. So this means basically that interpreters need to keep all information private, so it stays between the client and the interpreter. Details about the appointments aren't to be shared with others unless when ordered by law or unless you have the client's permission. So also practitioners need to be aware that the code of conduct can impact their work. In these circumstances, you need to make professional, appropriate decisions and conduct yourself in a manner that's right for the situation. The next thing I want to talk to you about is professional conduct. This means that you need to hold the client's needs at your top priority. All work should be either pro bono or paid. It should reflect your integrity as a professional interpreter. Next is scope of practice. This means that basically it means that you do not work beyond your means. So you're an interpreter, you are not meant to put in and interject your own opinion into the situation. You're not to counsel or advise your clients. It's purely just the interpreting that you do. Next is professional competence. This means that interpreters are to provide the highest possible quality of service through all aspects of their professional practice. Qualifications to practice. This means that all practitioners are to be accredited by NAATI at a paraprofessional or professional interpreter level, and this applies for deaf relay interpreters as well. They need to have completed the appropriate training to work as an interpreter. It's important that you possess the knowledge and the skills so that you'll be able to provide an accurate interpretation for the deaf client. This also means that in a situation where you feel that you linguistically wouldn't be able to cope with the situation, it's your responsibility to say, I don't feel comfortable doing this job, and then they can find somebody else. As an interpreter, it's important to have faithfulness to the interpretation. So this means basically just being as accurate in your interpretation as possible, not to change anything or leave anything out intentionally. But this isn't to be confused with a literal interpretation. Obviously, Auslan and English are different, so it's not ever going to be word for word. Next is non-discrimination. So that's fairly obvious, just not discriminating against your clients, depending on gender, sexual orientation, race, that sort of thing. And lastly, interpreters are to have a commitment to ongoing professional development. This means maybe attending workshops, conferences, courses, so that your skills are always up to speed. And lastly, communication preferences are also mentioned in the Code of Ethics. So this means choosing and respecting the client's preferred form of communication, whether it's Auslan or with deaf-blind, it might be hand over hand, tactile signing, that sort of thing. And that is all for today. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Laura. That was good. It was really interesting. I do have a question, which is a situation I faced professionally recently. Okay, I'm often presenting to a deaf community, and I'll be talking about emergency services or whatever. And sometimes I will present in English and have an interpreter, and they'll do an Auslan. And then sometimes I will present directly in Auslan. And it varies a little bit on the community group. For example, if they're seniors, I use an interpreter because of the variety of fingerspelling and different. Okay, so the question I have is around register, I guess, in a way, and formality or level. For example, my Auslan, if I'm using Auslan, then it's easier for me to reach directly the grassroots community. If I'm using English, I just automatically flip into a slightly more formal register. And what will happen is, so the interpreters then, do they match me, do you think, or would it be better to match what the community needs? How do you do that?
It is tricky, but as the interpreter, they are to interpret what you are saying, and that goes along with, you know, your tone, your register, that sort of thing. So it's just about being the most authentic interpretation of what you're doing.
Good. Oh, thanks. That actually helps. Okay, I just know. Be careful, don't get too academic in my English.
Yeah, definitely. I think just
give the interpreter the material that I want. Okay, they're going to represent me.
Yes, and that's their job, is to represent you and what you're saying, and then vice versa for the deaf people who want to communicate with you.